Good morning. It's good to be back on this stage. It's good to be sitting with a topic that has been informing me as a result of sitting with it. Every time I do a class or a workshop or a talk, I notice the power of our attention. That I begin to consider a certain topic or a certain area of thought, and it's right there in front of me, informing me the whole way along. This month we're looking at the power of personal storytelling, and so my brain has been keeping me entertained these last few weeks watching the stories that I tell. It's really a fascinating place up there. And the further along this path of spiritual inquiry I go, the more I realize that our experience of life is very, very subjective. And by that I mean we make it up. And we have a tremendous amount of power and of choice as to how we make it up. So that's what I want to look at this morning, because our experience of life seems to depend largely, or maybe even completely, on how we look at things, at the stories that we tell ourselves. And this is the power of mind that we talk about here, the power to co-create our life experience. We can and do just that every day. And we can create heaven or we can create hell, all by ourselves. But until we realize that we are the storyteller, until we realize that we can change our minds, that we can change our perspectives, change our point of view, and tell the story any darn way that we choose, we seem to often give away our power to it. You follow me? Okay. Have you ever known anyone who you can pretty much count on every time you see them to tell you pretty much the same story? You laugh. Are you that person? It's a good question to check ourselves. Because every day, either in our own minds or verbally to someone else, we're telling some story. And once we begin to realize how powerful that is, things get very interesting. It's been a very interesting week inside of my head. And here's the million-dollar question that we get to ask ourselves. Is the story that I'm telling resulting in the kind of life experience that my heart and soul desire to have in this lifetime? Is the story that I'm telling supporting, reinforcing, and resulting in the kind of experience that my heart and soul desires to have in this lifetime? And the story was told about a man who was walking along a city street when a flower pot fell off the sill above him and crashed at his feet, missing him by inches. There are 4 paths of response that the man might take, 4 stories that he might choose from. First, the story of knee-jerk reaction. He would yell a curse towards the window, perhaps dash up the stairs, find the owner, and confront him. Second, the story of the victim. This experience would confirm his belief that the world is out to get him. And he would go about the rest of his day protecting himself from evil and retelling the story again and again. I know when I hit close to home, there's that nervous little, ooh, yikes. Third, the story of detachment. He would rationalize this as his karma, do nothing, and just keep walking. And fourth, the story of love. He would go to the flower store on the corner, buy a new plant, and deliver it to the person whose plant had been blown off the sill. Is the story that I'm telling resulting in the kind of life experience that my heart and soul desires to have in this lifetime? We can tell when it is. Some of the signs that we're living in alignment with our heart and soul desires: frequent bouts of peace and ease and joy, recurring experiences of awe and wonder, unpredictable compassion, empathy, and loving kindness. I've come to think of this kind of living as inhabiting myself well. And that's what I want to do. I want to inhabit myself well because I believe it's my design. I believe it's our design. Is the story that I'm telling myself in alignment with that design? I'll give you an example. There's so many examples to choose from, so many stories. We all have lots of them, and we make them up. In other words, our stories aren't so much about what happens, but how we frame and contextualize what happens. There are always two parts, two things, two factors to consider. One is what happens, and the other is the meaning that we attach to what happens, the story that we tell. Can you feel that? There's what happens, and there's the meaning that we attach to it. Let's take a simple example that I got to experience this last weekend. This is what happens when you start focusing on a topic. The person in the car in front of me or you who is not driving 16 miles below the speed limit on a 2-lane road where passing is impossible. Infinite possibility. Behind the wheel is such a great opportunity to practice because of the fabulous abundance and diversity of perfect, whole, and complete expressions of God that we share the road with. That's not your story? We often seem to start this kind of storytelling process from a common premise, which is things are not going the way I think they should. And people, don't get me started with people. And what's with this obviously crazy person in front of me? Can you say turnout? Sign after sign, slower traffic use turnouts. Do you ever find yourself reading the signs to the people in the car ahead of you? Got the whole body kind of thing. It's like, you could pull over here. Bless our hearts. And we start to make things up. So maybe it's only me. Maybe not. Are they alone in the car? Because the more people in the car, the more opportunities we have to tell a story about people. And check their gender, because gender will affect the story that we tell. Just saying. I'm not going there, but I'm just saying. They're probably tourists and probably have been to a winery. No situational awareness. They're probably chatting, taking pictures while they're driving. They're actually a danger to society. Absolutely clueless, self-absorbed. I wonder about humanity. I think people are getting more and more clueless. Don't you agree? See, that's another part of storytelling. We enroll support for our position. Don't you think the same thing? And we can work ourselves into a dither. And we're just making it up. Fascinating. Based solely on the story we're telling ourselves, we generate all kinds of physiological responses, and the brain starts doing the whole chemical dump into our body because something is seriously wrong here, an imminent threat to our well-being. When in fact, all that's happened is someone is driving slow. If you want to practice, if you want to get a general sense of the feeling tone of some of the stories that you tell yourselves, drive out to Jenner at noon on a Saturday and go north and watch your head. It's fascinating what happens. These examples are relatively insignificant in the scheme of things. Something similar happens every day of our lives. The person in front of you is driving slow. That's what's happening. But the meaning that we attach, and the meaning that I attach to the story that I tell about what's happening, determines my experience. It's not so much what's happening that determines my experience. It's the story that I tell. Is the story that I'm telling myself resulting in the kind of life experience that my heart and soul desire to have? We're so funny. We say that we want to experience peace and love and joy and ease, and then we walk out the door into our world. We get behind the wheel, or we go to work, or we go whatever it is, and we tie ourselves into knots. So take anything that happens to you. Take something that's happened this last week. Make it real. Make it yours. And insert it into this story. There's what happens, and there's the meaning that we attach to the story. Something that's got some charge for you. Something that you twitched about just a little bit. I watch for the things that make me twitch, because I know there's something there for me to consider. I know that there's a possibility that there's another point of view, another story for me to tell, if I can be awake and aware enough to realize it and to choose it in that moment. Sometimes I can't. Sometimes I get to choose it later, and that's okay. I cut myself all kinds of slack that way because I'm just human. We're just human. It's okay. We're okay. But the more I practice it, the more aware of it I become. See, that's the benefit. And the funny thing is, we tell our story and we want reinforcement, and when we start to challenge that, or when we start to challenge it with each other. For example, we're having an interaction with someone that's very upset. Now here's an experiment. Suggest to them that there might be another possibility as to how they are reacting to the situation. In fact, try it with your spouse. Let me know how that works out for you. But it's funny how attached we get to our story. I am supposed to be upset. There's an underlying belief. I'm supposed to feel awful, and I need you to reinforce my position that I feel awful about this, based on a totally subjective story that I'm telling myself. I just made it up. Don't you agree? We might want to pause right there and reconsider. I can tell you right now that my motives for looking at this kind of thing are very selfish. Living in a constantly agitated or dissonant state of mind and body is not my design, nor is it yours. And frankly, it feels awful. The more I start paying attention to this stuff, the intelligence in my body knows when I'm living in alignment, when I'm telling a good story, and when I'm not. And how does it know? How does it inform me? Because I feel it. I want to be aware of that. That's my litmus test. That's my compass. How does this feel? How does this story I'm telling feel? It feels awful. Alrighty then. Considering we just made it up to begin with, maybe there's another possibility here for us to consider. Because that dissonance is hard on us, and it will make us sick physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. And this way of looking at the world can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. It becomes a way of looking at the world. Because we will find what we're looking for, no matter what we're looking for. If I'm looking for what's wrong, I will find it. If I'm looking for what's right, I will find it. This is how powerful we are. I want to inhabit myself well every day. And so in order to support that heart and soul desire, I consciously and intentionally watch my story. I watch how it informs me. I watch what I choose. And as a direct result of that, I experience a whole lot of good in my life. Or I can be unconscious, reactive, and feel a whole lot of awful. I'm very capable of that as well. My motives are selfish, I'll own that. I also know that what I choose and the stories that I tell affect not just my own life, but everybody who walks through my mind and my heart and my day. We can feel the stories that we're telling within each other. I think about when I'm telling myself a story that makes me very cranky. I don't have to say a thing. I can show up, and you know it. This is how we affect each other all the time. It's like a pot of soup, human consciousness. What kind of ingredient do I want to be today? Because the ingredient that I choose, be it peace, love, awe and wonder, loving kindness, or agitation, suffering, it contributes to the whole. We affect everybody that we encounter every day with that. Some of you have heard me talk about another spiritual practice that I incorporated a couple of years ago, and I found it to be a fascinating experiment. And that is, I choose to let everybody in front of me when I'm driving. It's the greatest thing. I figure in 2 years, I've lost about 7 minutes as a result of that practice. Try it. It feels good. I don't have to bull my way through life. I don't have to bull my way through traffic. I don't have to save those 7 seconds that it will take for me not to let you in ahead of me. It feels good. Something else I discovered is people on the road started getting very nice all of a sudden. Because that's what I was looking at the world from that kind of choosing. I noticed not where people were being dissonant on the road, but where people were being kind. Who knew? There's kind people on the road. Look for them. These are kind of simple day-to-day examples, but they're important because our lives are built based on the brick and mortar of every single day. There are big things, but really it's the day-to-day that sets the tone. Those are the lenses through which I see my world. So when the big things come along, I have some practice. I have a foundation that I've created. I'm looking for the good, even when the big things, the big challenges, the heartaches, when the bottom falls out, when there's life and death stuff before me. I've practiced. Inhabiting ourselves well doesn't mean that things aren't going to happen in life. They are. Doesn't mean we're not going to experience challenge and loss. We will. And honestly, I want to love so much that my heart aches. It's a conscious choice. So then it's not a bad thing when my heart aches, you see? It's the same experience, but what's the story that we're telling? I want to love so much that I can feel and laugh and cry and live big and wide and rich and deep. And it's messy, and I'll concede that in advance. Because the option is not to live and not to love and not to risk. Anais Nin sits back there in the bleachers of my head and has for about 20 years. And the trouble is if you risk nothing, you risk even more. And the trouble is, if you risk nothing, you risk even more. You see, I've lived that choice of living small, and I don't think that's what life is about. I don't want to come in at the end of my life hermetically sealed and neat. There's a great writing, and I meant to look it up and didn't. I just thought of it, just remembered it this morning, about sliding in at the end of our lives, all used up, and being able to say, I used every aspect of my life while I was here. That's the story I want to tell. I want to say yes to life instead of no. I want to love big. I want to live big. That's my heart and soul desire. See, that's our design. And things are going to happen along the way, and we get to choose based on the stories that we tell. Do I shut it down, wall ourselves off, or do I continue to look for the good? Do I continue to practice loving kindness? Do I continue to find divinity in every moment, in every person, in every circumstance, in every situation, without exception? It's a big invitation, but it's my story. I can tell it however I want, as can you. And we've got great stories. We've got great evidence. Big stuff is going to happen in life. I know some of you have heard this story, but whenever I think about story and the impact that it has on our lives, I think about something that happened to me in 96 on the 8th of May at 2:45 in the afternoon. Great setup, huh? We have these points of demarcation in our life. We have these significant events that significantly influence our story. What's the story we're going to tell? Here's what happened. I got jumped. 3 guys broke my back. That's what happened. I lost my health. I lost my home. I lost my marriage. I lost my toys. I lost everything that I defined myself by. That's the story. How do we want to contextualize these things? Was it good or was it bad? Was it right or was it wrong? Because here's what I've come to realize. Had that not happened, I wouldn't be standing here today doing what I'm doing. Very subjective. What's the story we want to tell? Oh, and it's a good story, because those are just the highlights. I've got bushels of evidence, and I can spin it however I want to spin it. What am I looking for? What story am I telling? Is it in alignment with my heart and soul desire? Or does it just feel awful? Our reality, our experience of life is very subjective. We make it up. And there's a tremendous amount of choice as to how we make it up. It depends on the stories we tell. This is the power of mind. And until we realize that we are the storyteller, you are the storyteller of your life, we can change our minds. We can change our perspectives. We can change our point of view and tell the story any darn way we want. So my invitation to you today is to ask yourself that $1 million question. Is the story that I'm telling myself about my life resulting in the kind of life experience that my heart and soul desires to have? And if it's not, you need another story. And you can have one. That's the good news. You can have one. And if you don't know how to get it, find people that have done it. Practitioners are trained to do this kind of work. Ministers, therapists, the people in your life, the heart and soul people in your life that have something that you want. Ask them how they got it. We talk about changing our lives by changing our thinking, and this is how it happens. You can tell any story you want. It's the most amazing thing. And once that realization happens, see, then we become empowered. We can even change the past. Each of us has within us the God-given right to choose, again, to use this power of mind. It's our design. It's our birthright. This is the power to co-create, and we do it every day. You're already doing it. That's the realization. I'm already doing exactly what he's talking about. But what is it that I'm doing? What is the story that I'm telling? What is my theme? Because these stories tend not to be just one-time events. There tends to be a theme involved. I know. What's your theme? Maybe we could ask each other to keep each other awake. It's better than what's your sign? It's like the whole New Age bar talk. What's your theme? It's a good check, though. What's my theme today? What am I choosing and why? What are the lenses through which I'm seeing my world? What's the story that I'm telling? Rumi says that there's 1,000 ways to kneel and kiss the ground. I thought about that early this morning when I realized about 1,000 people are going to walk through this place today. See, the ways that we do it is not going to be like anybody else. I don't have to accept their story. I get to craft my own. You get to craft your own. It was in our opening affirmation. Unique, individual expressions of life. That's what we all are. We're tremendously powerful. Today the invitation is, ask yourself, what's my story, and might there be something that feels better?